There is a hallway with 100 doors. At 3 in the morning, it is almost silent. A light hum from the building, a distant elevator, a dog shifting behind a wall. In the old world, many of those doors belonged to couples. 2 keys on the same ring, 2 toothbrushes by the sink, 1 shared calendar, crowded weekends. In the new world, more and more doors belong to one person. 1 name on the mailbox, 1 pair of shoes by the entrance, 1 plate drying on the rack. And the strange part is not the emotion, it is the math. Because when society reorganizes into solo units, everything downstream changes. Housing, work, consumption, risk, even the way cities feel at night. People keep calling it a loneliness epidemic, but that translation is sloppy. Single does not automatically mean lonely. You can be single and surrounded. You can be partnered and quietly isolated. So the question is not, can people be single and happy? The question is, what happens when one-person households become the default architecture of adulthood? And what happens when that shift is driven by 2 forces at the same time? Liberation and fracture. Both are true. A French magazine article cites calculations from The Economist. It makes a brutal counterfactual. If marriage rates had stayed as high as 2017, the world would have around 100 million fewer singles. 100 million. That is not a vibe. That is a structural variable. Now focus on France. One French projection suggests that by 2030, single-person households could approach the mid-40s share of households in metropolitan France. And among ages 25 to 34, the projection pushes it close to half. Close to half, in the age band where previous generations built the base layer of family life. A quiet revolution. Not loud, not sudden, just steady. But revolutions are never clean. They come with narratives that fight each other. One narrative says, people are finally free. The other narrative says, the market is broken. Both narratives have evidence. Let us start with the hidden engine most people ignore. Households, not people. Households. A population can stay almost stable, while the number of households explodes. Here is a simple picture. 10 friends in 2 apartments, 5 per unit. Then 5 couples form, still 10 people. Now 5 apartments. Then breakups happen. Now it is 10 apartments. Same population, 5 times more doors. That is the household effect. It is why housing markets can feel like they are choking, even when population growth feels mild. More doors per person, more kitchens per person, more bathrooms per person, more heating per person. Life paid at retail. Now add the second engine, decohabitation, later marriage, more separation, more time spent outside couple life. In some projections, the share of one-person households rises sharply, while couples fall below half. The couple stops being the default container. And once the default container changes, institutions lag behind. Taxes, benefits, housing supply, healthcare, even how employers think about availability. That lag is where the pain accumulates. Now bring the culture back in. A French magazine summary describes a shift that is not only statistical, it is symbolic. A viral Vogue-style narrative appears. Being in a relationship is no longer proof of femininity. It is not an accomplishment. In some circles, it is almost more valued to say you are single. On TikTok, young women repeat the same idea. Their choice feels validated by the culture, and the aesthetic of modern independence spreads. You hide your partner, you blur their face, you keep your relationship private. Not because you are ashamed, because public couple life looks uncool. But here is the contradiction. The same French magazine article says most singles do not actually celebrate it. Across countries, surveys suggest that a majority, something like 60 to 73%, would prefer to be in a relationship. So what is happening? How can a society produce more singles while many still want connection? Now watch what happens next. That is where fracture enters. The market did not only open, it also hardened. More selective, more stratified, more algorithmic. And when a market becomes more algorithmic, it tends to optimize for engagement, not stability. Dating apps reward novelty. They reward scrolling. They reward attention. They convert human preference into filtering. Filtering feels like control. Control feels like safety. So standards rise, not always out of arrogance, sometimes out of fatigue. You keep swiping because you can. You keep waiting because you can. And slowly, the average relationship window shrinks. Not because nobody is capable of love, because the incentives push everyone toward endless evaluation. Then the market adds new layers: politics, education, income, lifestyle, geography. More people refuse partners from the other side of a political divide. More people want someone with the same degree, the same stability, the same trajectory. As that sorting accelerates, the pool narrows. A French magazine article gives a harsh example: a reported height filter on Bumble that would eliminate most men. Whether that exact number is perfect or not, the mechanism is real. Hard filters create hard exclusion. Then comes the part most people do not want to admit: ranking. The article mentions the idea of a desirability score, an ELO-style logic. Profiles are classified, oriented, nudged, not to maximize compatibility, to maximize interactions, to maximize time on the app. The blunt line lands: at best you are a customer, at worst you are a product. If that sounds cold, good. It should, because markets get cold when they scale. Here is the social layer that almost never gets measured: stigma. A single man is often framed as carefree. A single woman is still more likely to be framed as unchosen. Old labels survive in new decades: old maid, cat lady, bitter, expired. Those words do not just hurt feelings, they change incentives. If you fear the label more than a bad partner, you will choose a bad partner. And sometimes the reverse happens. If culture celebrates singlehood as proof of strength, people perform it. They pretend they do not want love, because wanting love looks weak. Either way, pressure distorts choice. Now listen to how this market exhaustion looks in daily life. One Sunday night, transport strikes, rain. Someone walks across the city, not to see a friend, not to see family, just to meet a stranger from an app. A first date, a maybe, a coin flip. That is not romance. That is logistics under uncertainty. And after enough coin flips, people stop playing. They do not become anti-love. They become tired. Tired people filter harder. Tired people ghost faster. Tired people protect their peace. And protection becomes another driver of singlehood. Now, before we go further, we need to clean up one confusion. A statistic like people living alone hides more than it reveals. In the French radio discussion about this, the therapist describes three groups: chosen singlehood, a full choice; accepted singlehood, after disappointment, a choice under constraint; suffered singlehood, experienced as loss, shame, even as an injury. Same status, different inner life. One person closes the door and feels relief. Another person closes the door and feels erased. Same hallway, different reality. And there is another variable people ignore: time. Not the passage of years, the texture of days. A couple absorbs time with logistics, meals, chores, schedules, shared errands, shared obligations. Single life gives you back that time, but it also hands you the burden of deciding what to do with it. Some people turn it into freedom, others fall into drift. Now add work. Single adults are often treated as more available, less encumbered, more flexible. The person who can stay late, the person who can cover the emergency. It sounds like a compliment. It is often unpaid extraction. So the solo trend does not only change nights and weekends, it changes who is expected to bend, who is expected to carry. Now add screens. A generation ago, social interaction was default. You met friends because you had to leave the house for boredom to end. Today, boredom is anesthetized. You do not leave, you scroll. You do not call, you watch. You do not meet, you text. This is not moral failure, it is design. Screens are frictionless. Real life is full of friction. So the decline of real-world social interaction becomes another silent contributor to singlehood. Not because people became antisocial, but because the default path to connection became private, mediated, and convenient. And private, mediated connection is easy to maintain without ever committing to a shared life. Now zoom out. In the United States, One French magazine summary notes that the share of young adults living without a spouse or partner has doubled over roughly half a century. It cites The Economist numbers, around 50% of men and 41% of women. Those are not just individuals, those are markets. Markets where one side feels scarcity and the other side feels saturation. Markets where resentment grows. Markets where trust decays. And when trust decays, people move toward safety behaviors. Rules, guardrails, silence, distance. Not because they love distance, because they fear disappointment. Now we bring in the most important economic lens in this episode. Morgan Stanley Research, September 23, 2019. The title is simple: Rise of the She-Economy. And the core idea is even simpler. Women are positioned to drive the economic conversation from both the inside, as a workforce, and the outside, as consumers. Here is the number you should remember: 45%. Morgan Stanley forecasts that 45% of prime working-age women, ages 25 to 44, will be single by 2030, the largest share in history, up from 41% in 2018, nearly half, single, in the heart of career years. Then comes the growth rate. Single women are expected to grow about plus 1.2% annually from 2018 to 2030. The overall US population, plus 0.8. That is a demographic tailwind, a real one. Now connect the dots to wages. Morgan Stanley describes how the wage gap drivers have shifted. In 1980, women earned about 64 cents for every dollar men made. Today, estimates range between 77 and 85 cents. Progress, but incomplete. Then they offer the sharpest claim in the piece. Motherhood is the largest contributor to today's wage gap, because mothers often stop working or reduce hours. So what happens if marriage is delayed? If childbirth is delayed? If more women stay single longer? Labor force participation rises, hours worked rise, wage pressure rises. Singlehood is not only a social outcome, it becomes an economic input. Now look at leadership. Morgan Stanley notes that since 2010, the percentage of women executives increased across all developed regions. The largest gains appear in Asia, excluding Japan. Participation there has roughly doubled since 2010. North America and Europe sit at similar levels. Both improved steadily. Leadership changes decision-making. It changes hiring. It changes product design. It changes risk tolerance. It changes culture inside firms. That is why investors pay attention, even when they pretend not to. Now switch to consumer power. Morgan Stanley says women already control a large share of the consumer wallet. They estimate around $7 trillion contributed to US GDP per year. Women are the principal shoppers in 72% of households. Women also earn bachelor's degrees at higher rates than men. They are the primary breadwinner in nearly 30% of married households, and nearly 40% of all US households. So women influence spending, even inside marriage. But relationship status changes the spending profile. Their claim is specific. Single women outspend the average household on a per-person adjusted basis in several categories: apparel and footwear, personal care, food away from home, vehicles, including luxury and electric. This is not just lifestyle, it is cost structure. One person pays retail for everything. No cost sharing, no split rent, no shared utilities, no shared car payment, no shared insurance plan. The solo economy is expensive, per person. And when millions of people live that way, it changes which sectors win. Look at 3 doors in the same hallway. Door 1. A woman, 32, career-focused. She eats out more than she wants, because cooking for one feels pointless after a 12-hour day. She pays for convenience, and she calls it freedom, because the alternative sounds like a cage. Door 2. A man, 30, not unstable, just drifting. He wants a relationship, but he feels invisible in the app market. He scrolls, he matches, he gets nothing back, so he withdraws. Then he tells himself he prefers it that way. Door 3. A woman, 61, divorced. Her children are grown, her partner is gone, her friends are busy. She is not miserable, but she is one fall away from a crisis. One winter illness, one broken hip, one missed rent payment. These are not the same kind of singlehood, but they create the same economic footprint. One household, one door, one set of bills. and bills do not care about your story. This is why the solo economy shows up in small places: grocery portions, smaller packaging, single-serve meals, higher per-unit pricing, laundry, utilities, internet, insurance. Most of those costs do not scale down perfectly. They stay stubborn. So the cost of independence is not only emotional, it is arithmetic. And that arithmetic hits the modest and the poor first. Now the investor layer. Morgan Stanley describes a proprietary framework to identify the most gender-diverse companies. A holistic score measuring representation across boards, executives, managers, and employees, adjusted for industry and regional differences. Then they report a pattern investors cannot ignore. Globally, companies with stronger gender diversity outperformed less diverse peers by about 3.1% per year over the past 8 years. Past performance is not indicative of future results. But the point is not a guarantee. The point is signal. And if you combine that signal with the demographic trend of rising single working women, you start to see why the phrase "she-economy" exists. It is not activism, it is forecasting. Now bring it back to the door, because this is not only about women, it is about household formation. And household formation is the hidden engine of housing markets. More one-person households means more demand for units, more studios, more one-bedroom apartments, more small, efficient space. But housing supply does not pivot overnight, so prices rise, competition rises, and cohabitation becomes harder, which feeds the loop again. That is the solo feedback loop. Economic independence makes partnership optional. Optionality reduces marriage. Lower marriage increases one-person households. More one-person households increases housing demand per person. Higher housing costs make cohabitation harder. Harder cohabitation increases the appeal of independence, and the cycle feeds itself. You cannot fix a feedback system with a pep talk. Now there is a darker side that sits behind the glossy independence narrative. Risk. Couples distribute risk. They share job loss, they share illness, they share sudden costs. The single-person household carries those shocks alone. So, as singlehood rises, private insurance becomes more important. Savings becomes more important. And for people who cannot save, vulnerability rises. This is why the solo trend is not only the wealthy urban single. A large share of people living alone are not affluent. They are overrepresented in lower income categories. They live one paycheck away from a crisis, one broken appliance, one medical bill, one rent increase, and the door becomes a trap, not a sanctuary. Now consider aging. After a certain age, living alone becomes more common, especially for women. Not because of culture, because of demographics, widowhood, separation, longevity. So the solo trend is not only about youth, it is also about the last third of life, which means it touches healthcare systems, home care, loneliness risk, public spending. Now consider a different response: new relationship architecture. Not everyone who is single lives without intimacy. There are non-cohabiting couples, people who date seriously but keep separate homes, people who preserve autonomy while maintaining attachment. That model used to look unusual. It will likely look normal. And if it scales, it also scales housing demand. Because two people in a relationship can still occupy 2 units. So even when love exists, the housing footprint can remain solo. That is why this is not a romance story. It is a door story. Back to the hallway. 100 doors, same building, longer corridor. Some doors hide loneliness. Some doors hide peace. Some doors hide exhaustion. Some doors hide power. The point is not to judge the doors. The point is to notice how many doors exist now compared to a generation ago. More doors per person, more life paid at retail, more freedom and more isolation risk, more liberation and more fracture. That is the paradox. Now a final clarity check. A rise in people living alone does not automatically mean a collapse of love. It means the architecture of adulthood is diversifying. More one-person households, more non-cohabiting couples, longer gaps between relationships, friendship-centered lives, people building stability first, then choosing relationships that fit, instead of relationships that rescue. Some of that is progress. Some of that is loss. The job of this episode is not to moralize. It is to describe the system. So here is the line that carries the whole thing. Society is not built on couples. It is built on households, and households are splitting. More doors per person is not just a lifestyle trend. It is a system output. And if you want to understand why those doors multiplied, you do not start with feelings. You start with the mechanism. Because a dating market can look busy, loud, endless, and still produce fewer stable relationships than any generation expected. That is what the market not clearing looks like. Now here is the most dangerous lie. If you are still single at 33, the most dangerous lie is that it must be your fault. Sometimes the truth is colder. The market stopped clearing. In episode 4, we open the machine. We map the incentives. We map the timelines. We map the filters. Why the overlap pool shrinks. Why optionality concentrates at the top. Why apps keep the loop open. Why commitment becomes expensive. And why housing turns cohabitation into leverage. This is not a war. It is an autopsy. Episode 4, The Dating Endgame.